Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Coach's Corner. Tonight we're having a session on moving from trainee or from fighter to trainer. It looks like we just dropped off Brannos just as we were getting started, so he'll be back on here in just a second. So we'll go ahead and start with introducing all the trainers and guests on here tonight. We'll start with Brannos, who's just actually jumped back on.
I'm going to apologize to a lot of people. I'm just like switching computers. I'm having a lot of internet issues. So if I disappear, somebody will take over.
It's never looked better.
And I'll be watching the episode after. But meanwhile, we're lucky enough to have a bunch of some friends of mine that I know from the internet and from coming out here and just I've known for a long time. So our guest today is, I apologize, my video is going out, is Captain Nessa. She's from the mid-realm. Duchess Antigone from Anstiora. We got Warder, I apologize, I'm Raphael. Perfect, I said it right. And then our coaches, Bari and Tristan, myself, and Sivirid is joining us because he's been doing a lot of teaching back at his in his group, smaller group. But after coming back and working with us through COVID and getting put on vigil, he's busy rebuilding his group, which is wonderful to see. So tonight we're going to be covering going from a student to a teacher. And we actually had a wonderful conversation, and we probably should have taped and showed about some of the things that happens in that, that path. And, I mentioned to Tristan, I was lucky enough to come in the SCA after teaching martial arts. It took a while to, become a decent enough fighter where I thought I could, teach others how to, in the SCA fighting. But I already had a background in some of the teaching. So there's a lot of things that maybe I didn't have to go through. I went through in a different art, and that's, 35 years ago. And so I was thinking about this episode when we started, and I'm like, well, Tristan, how many years of training do you have?
Let's see, 1, 2, 3. After 3, I lose count.
Yeah. Is that decades or?
Yeah, exactly. It's been quite a while. I mean, I started in martial arts, I think, when I was 11 years old. I'm 55 now. So yeah, long time. And like we were talking about before the show, when I came into the SCA, I did not have instructor background. I wasn't ranked high enough to have gotten the responsibilities that intermediate and advanced martial art ranks put on you in terms of mentoring newer students and beginners. But I learned within the SCA, a lot of the times, one of the big problems that people have is that as they come up, they feel that they're never quite ready or qualified enough to actually share what they've learned. They may think, I don't know enough. I'm not experienced enough. I maybe can do a couple things somewhat well, but I'm not a knight. I'm not a royal peer. I'm not qualified to teach. So I should just sit down and shut up and not share what I know. Whereas within the kind of traditional martial arts, very often you'll have, once you're an intermediate student, like a blue belt or purple belt, oftentimes you will be expected to help white belts. You're told if somebody's beneath your rank, you help them. You help them improve. You help them prepare for tests. Like you are given formal responsibility for training people that are newer than you, even if you're in only a year to 2 years. So that's what I see as kind of a difference there, culture-wise, between traditional martial arts and the SCA. Did we lose Brannos again?
We lost Brannos again. So why don't we have our guests go ahead and introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what they've been doing or where they've been training. So we go ahead and start with Warder Raphael.
Hey, so I'm in the barony of Ayrton. I'm in Chicago. We've got like a pretty top-heavy practice here. Lots of mods at like one of the practices, and then the other practice is a little more evenly split. But I've been helping the fencers grow, helping folks with all different levels. As well, I also come into this with some sort of education background outside of the SCA to teach kids' circus classes, and it turns out it requires a lot less patience to teach adults who want to be there than kids who don't. So I have a lot more fun teaching in the SCA. But on top of that, I've also gone out and sought professional training. So I spent right before everything shut down, I spent a week in Vancouver. I did a 50-hour intensive on rapier and longsword with one of the top trainers in the world, because I knew being good at fighting doesn't actually make you good at teaching. And I had been teaching for a while, and I'd gotten pointers here and there, but spending a large amount of dedicated time on just how to teach has really improved my game as a teacher.
Okay, and next we'll introduce Duchess Antigone.
Hi, so I'm Duchess Antigone, and my main background comes from foam fighting. I foam fought for almost 10 years before I came over to the SCA. And then when I came over to the SCA, I trained, obviously, my husband's Duke Sven. I train with him all the time. If you sent him a training video, I have watched it and given criticism on it, because that's his big thing, is making me watch it first. And then, so from there, when we moved into SCA, I couldn't do heavy fighting, so I did a lot of rapier fighting. So learned a lot about that, did a lot of training and working with the rapier community. Now I'm over back with the heavy community, and so training and teaching in the rapier community versus teaching in the heavy community is culturally different, which is kind of cool to learn and see. But other than that, really what I have been primarily wanting to focus on is traveling and learning everybody else's theory. I understand our household's theory and fighting theory very, very well, but there's so many other things out there to learn and kind of incorporate. So what I've done for the past year is travel, which I've met Brannos and traveled to a lot of different places, and kind of started pulling all of those theories in to kind of our theories, and then started teaching at our local practice, which is here in the Dallas Fort Worth area. And so we've been having a lot of success with that, and it's been interesting having someone like me who is more logical about things and breaking things down, who's also a small fighter, be able to teach small fighters and also taller fighters from a different viewpoint than kind of, what we have here, which are a lot of 1% fighters who have been good for a really long time. So that's kind of what I've been doing, and the Coach's Corner has been really helpful in able to have those conversations, and not just that, but also meet people to have conversations and learn from. So, yeah, hi.
Okay, and next, Captain Nessa.
I'm from the Barony of Brandokin, which is in the Akron area of the Mid-Realm. I have actually steadily been heavy fighting since 2016. So I'm probably the youngest one here in terms of how long I've been fighting. But when the pandemic hit and there were a bunch of drills to be had, I jumped on board, attended everything, soaked it all in. And when practice started resuming, a lot of the locals started coming to me and asking me, how do we do these things? How do we do these things? How do we do these things? So I've kind of been the go-to here for training our newer fighters, or training the drills that Brannos and everybody up there has been distributing out into the SCA world. I've kind of been the go-to person here for doing that. So.
Okay, you know what? I'm going to throw this one over to Sivirid, since I asked you to come on because you've been starting a practice. So tell us about your training. And really, did you have a lot of training before you're obviously getting knighted, but did you do a lot of training of others before that? Or is this really the first dive into a full-out training, being the person training everyone at practice?
So I've been off and on. So I started fighting 30-some years ago in Three Rivers in Callantyre, and then moved up to the Mid-Realm. And so I was the Knight Marshal in Rockhelden for a number of years. So running practice, but a lot of the practices there, I was probably the most junior person, or one of the most junior people there. So even though I was the Marshal, I was learning from everyone else. And so, but that was also in an era where it was as much block and or get hurt or block one or the other, and so it was not as much of a formal training. So one of the things that's been then after I took a break coming back, it's been really great coming in and hopping in and saying, oh, well, let's do some of these much more standard training exercises that are, not necessarily even involving being in armor, but doing stuff out of armor and then working your way towards. And so doing much more real actual training rather than just sparring. And so that's really changed my way of looking at that. I, at the very beginning, had a little bit of, okay, here's how you throw a shot, here's how you block a shot, but nothing like the continually, okay, week after week, you need to work on these fundamentals. And that's made a big difference. And so, as you're aware, my son's been fighting as well. He started fighting and he's been jumped in feet first into the training side. And so he's accelerated really rapidly. And so what's really cool is we can go up into the Detroit practice, get a high-end practice, but then come to another practice and work through some of those training things at a slower pace, trying to get through them and go back over them repetitively rather than just one time and say, oh yeah, how do I do this?
All right. Tristan, we kind of have, I think most people have a good background on your training stuff, and you kind of covered yours a little bit earlier. But let's shoot down to Bari. Yep. How long you been training stuff at your site?
Well, as we talked about before the show started, my background, I was a high school teacher many decades ago for a few years, and I probably should have fixed my socks before I got on the big screen here. And I had a little bit of coaching experience. I was a high school track and field coach, high school basketball coach. And I took a break from the SCA for a good 10 years. When I got back into it, I had a pretty substantial melee background. And so we'll say I got back into it in 2014. I had a pretty substantial melee background, which a lot of fighters don't have. So I was certainly not in a position to teach, sword and shield. I mean, there's levels of expertise in sword and shield that if you don't really know what you're doing, there's plenty of other places people can go. But there's a lot of gaps in knowledge, I think, on the melee side. And our local practice here in Philadelphia, at the time, our top ranked fighter didn't have a GOA yet. So we didn't have any knights at our practice. We didn't even have any GOAs at our practice. And so I kind of took it upon myself to start running little melee drills, getting people interested in doing something other than sword and shield. And that was kind of where I really started to dip my feet into teaching people on that side of things. And then we found a little small group of college students at Drexel University, and we started running regular practices there and getting people, brand new, first time in armor, and starting to get them through drills. And I'll tell you, through my experience, if I could go on a time machine and go back and watch those practices, there's a lot of stuff that I did that I wouldn't do today. Nothing crazy, nothing dangerous, but just things at the time that I thought was the right way to fight, that now I think there's better ways to do it, or maybe more efficient ways to do it, or maybe ways that'll get people to not take their helmets off earlier, or get them to come back to the next practice, or all that kind of stuff. So that's really where I kind of got that level of experience in. And then anyone that's seen me out there on the internet, it's probably through my spear videos. And yeah, I just got to a point where I'd sort of gone out and find all the best spear fighters I could and try to soak up as much knowledge as I could. And even though I was far from being a knight, again, we've got another area where there's not a lot of expertise. So I started just throwing stuff out on the internet, and I didn't get anybody to come up and say, you really shouldn't be saying that stuff because you don't know what you're talking about. And same thing over time. There's a lot of stuff that I think I've told Brannos this before. Brannos, I saw one of his videos and I was like, it was the hip forward position. And I was like, yeah, I don't know if that guy knows what he's talking about. I've never seen him fight. And sure enough, now I use it, so I used to teach people not to use it. And a side note to that we could even maybe carry through in this discussion is it's interesting when sometimes there's a right way to do something and then a different right way to do something. There's still a lot of people that still do, I call it sort of more the more traditional method. And we don't need to get into specifics here, but the the hip back method, or the hip sort of in a line method, versus a hip forward, bringing your back, shoulder, and hip kind of more toward your target, is kind of more of the newer style. And hey, they both get lots of kills and defend yourself pretty well. So with sword and shield, you can have, sword blocking versus less sword blocking, sword foot forward versus shield foot forward, A-frame versus hanging guard.
I think me and Tristan just went through an episode like that.
Yep.
Well, we have. It's interesting because I pulled up a link and that covered kind of the things you have to think about as a trainer and making the changes. And it's been interesting because a number of you talked about the continually learning piece, and I think that's Antigone, you were nailing it. We're like, I'm traveling and I'm learning all these different methods and I'm pulling stuff together to really create the type of trainer you're going to be. And some people can't fight certain ways, or they just, I'm going to tell you, me and Ronvald we train together. We have the same foundation, but we're significantly different because he doesn't have quite the burst I do. But fundamentally, if you look at what we do, it's very, very close. It's just the speed difference and the timing differences. And it's those kinds of things that you start realizing it's like, oh, this person can do it this way. And that's an even better way to become a teacher. So, Antigone, can you kind of expound on that piece that you're getting out of your travel right now? Because I think it's super important.
Yeah, so I have been traveling as much as I can. And when I first started doing this, I just decided, hey, it would be really cool to kind of follow my husband around to some of these places and meet some of these people who I've heard about are, icons and big names. And I didn't really think I would get a whole lot out of it because I didn't think that really they'd want to even spend time teaching me because I'm new at heavy fighting. In particular. But everyone has been so gracious and so helpful and has answered all of my very curious and sometimes silly questions and sometimes incredibly in-depth questions. But the goal is to have an open mind when you go and you meet somebody who fights a different style and trains a different way. So when I'm talking to, for instance, when I went to Duke Sean's practice was the first big one I got to go to, I listened to him teach and I listened to how he taught people and the way he taught them in what order, which was very different than the way from like my household teaches and the order it teaches it in. But I asked him, well, why do you do it that way? And out of that, I actually learned a whole lot about ways to improve the way we teach here just from that conversation alone. And that's not even teaching me, oh, I use my hip this way instead of that way. It was literally that was something I gleaned from that trip that was incredibly useful. So just having an open mind when you talk to people and not closing it off of like, oh, well, that just won't work, or oh, that's stupid, or that's not how I do it, it's super key in order to not just make yourself better, but what might not work for me because I am a smaller fighter and I don't have that much mass and so forth. It might work really well for somebody at my practice that isn't getting it. And so I'm able to say, hey, I can't do this, but I learned this and it might help you, even though it doesn't help me. And so that's the big takeaways I've had through my whole travels over the past year of going to, I think I've gone to 7 kingdoms and 7 different areas of practice at this point within a year. And hopefully this year I get to add to it even more.
So, Barry, you had a couple of quick questions there, you threw out in the comments here.
Yeah, no, I thought what she was saying was very fascinating about their order of teaching versus how Duke Sean had a different order of teaching. I was wondering if you could give us an example, Antigone, because I find that very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So the big example that stands out is that our household and the way it teaches a foundation of chest and shoulder isolation first and how you throw and generate power. Whereas Duke Sean and that kind of group over there, they teach your power comes from the hip. And so they're going to teach you how to move your hip and how to rotate into the shot before they teach you how to generate the power through your shoulder. So that's very, very different when you're thinking about it, because you have to learn it either in one order or the other. If I learn it with my shoulder first, then I can't cheat that action with my hip. If I learn it with my hip first, then I will always be able to, if I don't learn how to isolate properly, I'll always be able to cheat my isolation. And so it was really interesting to see the differences of order in which you teach them in and the potential repercussions of that. Now, not one way isn't better than the other. Nope. It just depends upon the student and your theory and everything else. And so it was just really interesting to me. And we have had a couple people where it worked better for them to actually switch to way Sean teaches, which is the torso, bottom up part of the torso rather than the shoulder isolation first. So kind of cool.
Yep, no, that's a really a great example of what you're talking about. We tend to start a lot with feet and build up. So it's totally and like you said, learning those different things can oftentimes help you with different students and where you can see they understand, where they may get the best, where they may feel the best about doing stuff. I mean, some people just want to go and throw. So you get them primary throwing techniques. Some people are not comfortable throwing or getting hit yet, and diving into understanding how to move and connect becomes another layer. So there's a great learning lesson. Raphael, I got a question for you. You said you went to a kind of a special training class for rapier. What kind of stuff did you come out of that with? I mean, what would you say was the most important piece that you came out? And here's again, you already probably were doing a lot of this stuff, and you're again going out, number 2 method, keep doing what keep learning type of deal.
Yeah. So the biggest thing I took away from that intensive was specifically, here's a vocabulary to describe each and everything that you're doing, right? Like there's a lot of intuitive fighters out there. There's a lot of folks who they show up and they have athleticism and they see how it's going and they just kind of do it. And those people are super easy to train. I, as a coach, I'm not if those folks want to learn from me, I'm very happy to teach them. But I'm much more interested in hey, here's this person who didn't show up at 6'5", 210 with a varsity sports background.
Right.
Right. Here's someone who they want to learn. Right. That's the most important part. But they didn't show up with all of the attributes already there. And I'm really happy to teach those people. So having a way, so it's okay, if 2 swords are crossing, how do we describe that? Right. And I kind of knew intuitively that I had to kind of have my sword over their sword. And I had to grab my messer for a second. The closer to the hilt is kind of stronger. But I didn't have a great way of describing all of the pieces. And I came away okay, so if we're both thrusting at each other, the thing that matters most is crossing. So if I'm not crossing over your sword, right, if I'm just kind of pushing through, it's not going to help as much. And that matters a lot. And then I also need to care about the leverage, right, being closer to the hilt versus the point. And then on top of that, I have to work about edge alignment, right? If I'm pushing at the corner of the blade, right, the corner of this edge, it's not as strong as the edge itself. And those were all things I was doing. But by being able to describe that in a situation, I can work with a student and go, okay, cool. So your plan didn't work in that scenario. What was wrong? And we then have a way where we can both communicate, hey, I wasn't crossing, right? I was providing a weak angle. I was pushing with the hilt instead of pointing with the tip, and thus geometry was working against me instead of for me. So just coming back and having... And that's just talking about just the engagement of 2 blades on the thrust, right? I now have a better vocabulary for measure and tempo and cuts and just a whole wide and different kinds of drills. So for instance, there's blocked and there's variable drilling. So blocked is we're working together. I'm going to throw this thing 3 times. I'm going to throw this thing 3 times, and I'm going to go right. Whereas variable is I'm going to throw this shot, I'm going to throw this shot, and I'm going to randomize when those show up. And again, those were things that I had done, but going, okay, I'm going to consciously pick to do one versus the other. And I have a way to describe it both in my own brain as well as to the other people. And, on top of not just the train, not to their not just the other fighters I'm training, but as well the other trainers I'm training. And like spreading, right? Like the goal is not for this to be the sole vocabulary that all fighters use, but just as a starting point of like, hey, here is words to describe things that the top level folk are already doing. Now everyone else can consciously know what's going on and can use their language to describe it. And once people have a way to know, like understand what's going on, their progress shoots up immensely.
I would agree 100%. I think that's what really, when we look at modern our sport compared to older sport that have martial art that's been around, they have all of that already covered. They've put words around it. They have a deep understanding. People have developed a deep understanding and communicated that through sometimes centuries. Tristan, I mean, you can give obviously, especially in yours, that's an exact thing. They have names for lots of stuff. You have specific techniques. These are all written down and everything else, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of traditional martial arts don't have as much of the. I think we talked a little bit about this, that natural talent, the person that comes in and just through their natural athleticism, they're successful. And that actually creates an interest from people who want to learn. Okay, I see you out there beating people. How are you doing it? You show me that, as opposed to, well, you're second degree or third degree black belt. I want you to teach me through that kind of that hierarchical rank thing. I mean, of course, SCA has, okay, you're a royal peer, you're a knight. I expect you to be able to teach me, which is another huge thing of that transit, like the topic tonight, which is transitioning from a fighter to the trainer. Now you get knighted or you win a royal tournament, and there are a lot of people looking to you to say, all right, I want you to teach me. You're going to get your door knocked on quite a lot and expected to be able to teach. Well, what if you spend your whole time getting knighted just working on your own skills? And, I run across a number of practitioners, a number of fighters who are really good at fighting. And then you ask them, how do you do what you do? And they're like, I just hit the other guy and don't get hit. Like it comes down to a very simple description like that. And the process for doing it, they haven't really fleshed that out in their head yet. And that's a big challenge.
Yep. So we did get a question. Sivirid, can you go ahead and pop that question up? So how much attention do you pay to your students' learning style versus your teaching style? As Brannos has said, some people want a lot of formal instruction first, while others want to just jump into the game. So, I mean, as younger trainers than some of the other people in this group, what kind of things do you look for when do you pay a lot of attention to what your opponent is, what your student is learning, or, and do you change that's your teaching style then, so that's how you do. I mean, people are thrown at you a lot right at the beginning of practice to run through drills. The good part is you get thrown people that don't have armor yet, or people even that don't feel like fighting that night, but actually still want to be there and do stuff. So how does that work with the stuff you've been doing?
So I have a really good example from last night. I was running through somebody brand new, first day out. And I find that when it's your first day out, like putting something in their hands and being able to do something is key. And there's a lot of key places that go, here, stand in front of this pellet, I'll teach you how to throw a shot first. But I found that if you give them a foam weapon and I have a pad and I say, throw it at me, and we start moving around and we start doing things, they tend to get more excited about doing it. They're just not standing there with a bunch of people around them watching what they're doing and saying, oh, we'll try it this way, try it that way. And it's like, you could see now I'm one-on-one working with a person and we're not just staying in one place. And then somebody asked me a question Thursday night, and it was like, I actually don't have an answer to that. So I had to find somebody who could, and luckily we have other trainers around. So I called over one of the nights and I was like, this is what this person is asking. I don't know how to properly say it, or I don't know how to properly teach it. Can you help? And then I sat there and watched them so I can learn how to teach this later, because it's going to come up again. But there are people who don't want to fight or don't want to fight that night. So I try to get them to do drills. And then there's the people who are watching me do drills, nights especially, like wondering about it, going, I was like, why'd you do it? No, I'm good. And it's like, you know how to do it. Just when it gets broken down, you start overthinking about it, but you know how to do it. So come on in and we'll work with them. And I found that if you keep them from looking at their feet and looking at you, and you're like in a fighter stance and you do the thing and they match you, I'm like, that's it. That's exactly what we were doing. Things click in their head. So from the newest person all the way to the most experienced, just changing how the drill works or explaining it just a little bit differently makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. So I think, that's when the key is engaging and making connection with your students. Sometimes you can do that in a one-to-one relationship and the good part about being newer in the training end is you tend to just get a few people at a time, even one person a lot of times. Just like, hey, can you go train them? And I think that allows you to develop and learn actually when you're losing a person, where you have to shift them. And it's a great opportunity to not only learn how to read people better to help them learn, but it's actually a great opportunity how to read people better, period. And you learn.
Yeah, that's something different. That's from a one-on-one, also from like, there was one practice where it was just nothing but drills. And everybody's like, Nessa, how are we doing this? And I'm just like, now I have to figure out how to teach it as a class and not as a one-on-one.
Yeah, and that's but the good part is you're not thrown into, hey, here's 20 people, show the thing, right? Day one when you're first starting to train stuff, so I would tell people out there, don't be afraid to start small, because if you start small, it allows you to really think about what you're doing and develop a curriculum around what you're doing. And I think Raphael and Barry will tell you as teachers, curriculum is important, right, guys? So, and I'm gonna pop over, and we I put a link out to the I put a link out to a website, and we're gonna go through and the first thing in this, and they number these, and there's 10 subjects we're going to cover tonight real quick. But we've already covered one of them, and I'm going to cover the first one in the list. All of these are just as important as the others. So even though they're numbered, they're not numbered by what's most important. And the first one is be patient with all your, let's see, be patient with your students at all levels. And I think that's an important one. I'm going to throw this, I guess, Antigone, I'm going to throw this at you. You have you got every level at your practice, right? And I think, it's interesting when, sometimes you'll start with a new person, which is super easy, but then, somebody might come over that has a much higher level and want to know what you're doing, right?
Yeah, that definitely happens a lot at our practice. We are fortunate to have a very large growing practice, a lot of new people, but we also have mid-tier people, and then we have, 1%ers that are there. So it is the entire curve at our practice. And we really want to foster growth in not just in your own personal learning, but also in how to be a teacher, how to be a mentor, how to be a coach. And so we often take times where somebody who is, able to, we take them like, here's a new person, and they sit with us while we're teaching the new person, and kind of, we walk them through what we do, and they can kind of walk through it and see how we do it. And then the next new person that comes in, they do it. So it's a see, then do. And so you start there with the new person, and then from there, it's working with your kind of middle tier people of, okay, you know enough to kind of get out there and do things, but you don't, there's a lot missing, most of which is in theory, mental game, and pieces like that. And so that sort of teaching doesn't always have to come from a 1%er to your mid-tier. It's possible for you to not be a great fighter, but be an amazing coach that understands theory. And so we have people in that case that can go and teach those people kind of the next step in theory and not have that pressure of, the big bad Duke standing over them, teaching it to them and glaring at them. And so it becomes more of a conversation. It's more comfortable. And then the next part you have is like when you have somebody who is newer and they are actually helping, one of the top tier people. And in that case, they're not really teaching a top tier person something they don't know as far as skill set. What they're teaching them is a new way to say things, a new way to communicate, a new way to think about how do I teach, but also how do I communicate? Because it's not just teaching your skill set, it's communicating that to the person so that they understand it and they can take it and they can repeat it, which is a skill set that is incredibly hard to have. Almost nobody has it. And so we're very fortunate that we have several people in our practice that have it and that are teaching it to even the mid-tier people so that they can take that. So that's kind of what we do at our practice. It's been really successful. It's not something that we've done for a long time. This is something that we started when we got back out of COVID. We took COVID to really rethink about how we were teaching and guiding people and kind of how we wanted to do that. And then when we got out of COVID, this is kind of what we rolled with, and it's been amazing.
And I guess I've been watching a lot of fight practices, and given the show that, Tristan started to put us together and did this, and seeing a lot of practices. I mean, there was rarely, I don't know if I saw practices that had a lot of, ladder drills and things like that prior COVID. And now to see how fast practices have changed to adding drills and pad drills and all of these other things, and thinking about it in that depth that you're just talking about it, like we changed because there's other ways to do things. And we're thinking about training people, instead of just laying down what we know in our heads and how it feels. I think terminology is coming out of this much better. But I think probably one of the most important pieces is, and this is a part of the subject we talked about, is we're helping people understand what they're doing. And that communication part that you're talking about and learning to communicate better is a huge one. And a lot of one percenters out there need to learn how to communicate better. So, Barry, you've got a practice that has people from, all kinds of skill levels. You kind of have to have patience with everybody from, hey, I want to learn spear, and it's their first time, to the guy that's been practicing spear right next to you for the last, X number of years, right?
Not so much recently, but yeah, we do get a range of people at practice. And I guess with us, I think a big thing that I try to focus on is whatever is going to motivate them to keep coming back. That's probably something that I don't know if that, well, as I said earlier, I used to be a high school teacher. And as we talked about earlier, there's a difference between people that want to be there versus people that have to be there. But the nice thing about people that have to be there is they're going to come back. So never really worried about that too much. I mean, I wanted them to be excited about algebra. Because, I know we all know that algebra should be exciting enough on its own, but for that one or two people that, need a little bit of extra push, but they're coming back. So that's not something I never really thought about. But with us, it's like my number one goal is what's going to get them coming back. And I'll give you an example of something I've been toying with lately. So don't anyone take this as gospel. But I just had some people that I brought out the Pell on Tuesday night, and I showed them how to throw a flat snap. One of the things I've been doing is I've been showing people how to throw a wrap the first time on a Pell. And the reason why I do that is the wrap is kind of an advanced shot.
Yep.
But I can't get anyone to practice on the Pell with a flat snap. They think they've got it on the first time, just as I did. I did one practice of Pell. I was like, I got this. I got the flat snap, and then didn't touch it again for 4 years, and didn't kill anybody for 4 years either. So yeah, and the whole reason for teaching them the wrap is just to try to get them to like, oh wow, this is kind of interesting. This is a neat shot. It's like juggling or like running a unicycle. So I'm hoping it's something that they'll do. And then I always try to tell them, okay, but you have to practice the flat snap first. So do 100 shots of the flat snap, and then you do 100 shots of the wrap, hoping that'll motivate them. So that's probably the biggest thing right now, is just working on motivation. But again, with the varied, to your question, the varied ability levels, obviously the high end people, you're just trying to challenge whatever's that next step going to be. And with the lower end people, or rather I should say the newer people, it's more getting them motivated. Which, by the way, when I listen to you, all of you, I feel like I'm out of my league in that area. I'm always fascinated how you guys have these, really, it sounds like these really good practices where you're like, oh, I tell people to do this stuff and they just do it. I'm like, oh my God, I wish I could get there. Well, I wonder if it's a cultural thing. I mean, I feel like the people in the Philadelphia area are just very rebellious, myself included. Again, 28 years without a night before I finally took a belt.
Yeah. Well, you'll have all of those people that go 28 years and then they'll listen to you. Before I throw this back at Tristan, and maybe I'll throw this back at Tristan too. There was a comment. That's one brought up a comment that it's important lesson for new trainers is like acknowledge that other people have different learning styles, and that there's. Yeah, and I'm going to throw myself under the bus first, as I taught for a long time. I was good at connecting with people and helping people learn and exciting. I'm very good at exciting people about stuff. What I wasn't good was allowing them to learn necessarily their way. And that is like, you're going to learn my way, get over it. Because in martial arts, you learned my way, get over it. And that was one of those scenarios. And I think in the SCA, there's a place that you have to convince them a little bit that learning your way is important because it'll help them grow. But it's okay to also learn have your own way. Tristan, how do you handle that, even in the studio, right?
Well, yeah, and this is a great and a rather deep subject. Now, I guess I had sort of the learning lesson of being 6'4", lean with fast hands. And of course, I got pretty good with the traits that I had. I figured out sort of a fighting style that fit my body. And, what happens when you get somebody who's 5'6" and weighs, 225, who doesn't have fast hands, and they come and say, Tristan, teach me to fight like you do. And of course, like an idiot, I tried and realized, okay, we're working with a whole different set of traits here. Not just the physical, but also the mental part. And you get into this as you start training people, you realize, okay, what is their body capable of doing? What is their mind? Where is their mind at? And that's, to me, a bigger one than what the body is. Now, grant you, there are certain people that will have physical limitations that you're going to have to work around. You cannot just force them to fight the way that you do if they're very, very different physically than you are. But the mental gap is just as different, or can be just as different. Those are profound things. And I think that's one of those first things that happens in that transition between you realize what makes you a decent fighter. You've honed your particular traits, mental and physical, even spiritual. You've found success with it. And now you want to copy that. You want to grant those things or instruct somebody else in how to do what you did. Because that's initially what will bring somebody to you. Is I want to learn to fight as good as you do, Brannos. Show me what you do. That's the ask, right? And so you want to answer and say, here's how I do what I do. Let me help you do what I do. And then you find, well, maybe we got to adjust things a little bit. Maybe we need to change things up because you just don't move like I do. You don't think like I do. Yet you can train to get there, but that's going from being somebody's trainer for an afternoon or for an hour or for half an hour, and then being their coach for 6 months, a year, 2 years. The long-term commitment of, okay, we've got a ways to go to cross that bridge. And, I remember Lucan had a student of his years ago that you couldn't even tell the difference of the two of them when you spot them across the field. Their footwork was the same. Their armor was the same. Their build was the same. Their offense was the same. Their defense was the same. It was like a carbon copy. But how rare is that? That is extraordinarily rare. In fact, I'd say it's not quite unique, but it's pretty close. You can share those traits or the methods that you've found, but usually your student's going to find a slightly different variant, a slightly different application of what you do that's going to be different. And a good coach and trainer will accept that and say, if you can find success altering what I've shown you and you can get success with it, fantastic. As opposed to being, nope, you're not, you're still doing it wrong. You have to do it exactly the way that I do it. And until you're doing it exactly the way that I do it, you're doing it wrong. To me, that's the challenge of accepting that your student's going to be a little different than you are. But the goal is to help get them the success that they're seeking, not just being a carbon copy.
Yeah, so we're gonna, you know what? I'm gonna post it in. That's the way we can pop it up. We're gonna talk about this, although we actually talked about this a good bit already, and that is continuing your craft. And you know, to me, I'm gonna tell you, it's super important because we all, no matter if you're brand new or you're 30 years in and maybe towards the end of your career, there's always more to learn. And I spend a lot of time on other YouTube videos and people training and trying to learn training methods and also learn methods of different footwork methods in the fight. And so I think this is important. And you know, we have a bunch of people have already talked about it. Raphael talked about it right off the bat, and I appreciate that. I love the one piece I really love is the school effect that Rapier brings along with it. And you know, I've been up to a number of fighting schools up in North Shield, and I spent so much time with the fencers there because they all had these schools they developed, and they have that really depth place where they're building a culture. And it's funny because we're just talking about that on the side here as a group. Antigone was talking about the culture of fight practice, and that learning culture is so important, you know. I think, you know, one piece that, you know, they talk about is, you know, sometimes an instructor becomes an instructor, and then they think that's all they have. That okay, now I'm just going to teach. You know, they feel like they're qualified to teach. They're done learning, and I think for many of them, they actually short-term their life. And what I wanted to ask a lot of you guys is, you know, as newer instructors and trainers and coaches, you feel like you've grown? We'll start with Nessa on this one.
Throwing me on the spot. Do I feel like I've grown from like just teaching?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because not like since I'm teaching the things I've learned, that means I'm still practicing the things I learned, or finding better ways to do the things I learned, or better way to teach the things I learned. Sorry, not sorry, Brannos. So like, and that's still a growth for me. Yeah. Like, I'm on the injured list at the moment. So like, rather than sitting there going, oh, I wish I could play, like, I'm being active and saying, let's go do this, let's go do that, and training people. And that way I'm still working on something on my own instead of just moping being injured on the side. So yeah, like there's still growth to be had while teaching others.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, that whole injury piece and still going and teaching is, I think, you know, you're keeping fighting in your head, and that is a big part of constant learning. So, Raphael, what do you know, you already covered a little bit of this, but what do you have? How do you think you've grown from teaching others?
Yeah, so much. So I definitely think there's a narrative out there of like, you're a competitor, you do really well, and then you retire, and then you teach, and you do that until you're done. And I think that there's ways of doing that narrative well, but generally it's a bad idea. Like the idea, like if you don't want to compete anymore, that's fine. Like lots of people don't love tournaments, whatever. But I think the idea of like you're done and now you teach, like even if you are purely just on the teaching side, right? Like it's constant, right? If you have like I've seen fighters out there who were good 20 years ago and they had this method of doing things. And they've taught people to do that method to the bar they were at 20 years ago. And those people don't make it out of pools at tournaments because the rest of the community kept doing things. And they figured out an answer to that one trick. And, these people in this one practice who don't make it out very often or just have the one teacher who thought they were done and don't really learn anything more, right? Like, those people are, like, stuck. Right? I think that as a teacher, it's incredibly important to constantly go out there and constantly, right, not just at your own practice, try things out and see how students react to things, but, like, get outside. I think one of the so I play both in the SCA world as well as the HEMA world. So the HEMA world, like, does the same kind of swords we do on the fencing list in the SCA. It just looks a lot more like an Eastern martial arts dojo. It's like an educational model. And I think that both educational models have upsides, right? I think, like, the more traditional, like, dojo model, right, like, your progression is a lot clearer as opposed to, like, this group of people kind of votes on you in a secret room and you can be good at, like, things, right? Like, the thing you need to get to the next rank is really clear, right? And, like, it's defined and you're in this school, right? Whereas a lot of folks in the SCA model will often flounder early to mid-career, right, where they don't have a lot of guidance, or if it's just a practice where they only fight. I think the downside to the more, like, dojo model is that means a lot of times people never get out of the house. And I've seen those fighters who don't leave the house and don't try their stuff against people doing other things and don't learn from other teachers. And, like, if you have a teacher who tells you you shouldn't learn from other people, find someone else. Now, if your teacher says, hey, I'm going to help you by, like, filtering out information, because if 20 different people give you an answer, it's going to be really confusing. I'm going to help with that process. That person's good. Keep with them. But, like, if they're trying to control you and they're saying, like, I have the only right answer, run away. But yeah, like, I think that both on the fighting and on the teaching end, like, you need to constantly be right. Like, I'm always looking at my interpretations of manuals. I'm always looking, like, how I teach things. And if you ask me to run a class this year and you ask me to run that same class a year or 2 years ago, they aren't the same class.
Yep. No, I would agree 100%. Antigone, how have you grown from kind of learning and teaching others, really?
Well, that's a great question. So I, again, as I've kind of spoke a little bit earlier, I try to keep more of an open mind and listen to what people are saying, especially, of course, if they are able to demonstrate it physically. That's the best, right? Because you can say, oh, not only is this person that I'm listening to able to, say things that make logical sense, but then they're able to demonstrate it and kill everybody out in the field with it. So clearly it's effective. The problem is that it's effective for them, not necessarily for you or anyone else. And so when we start looking at, well, how do I change my training? What do I do with that? You have trainers who will sit there, or a lot of 1% and some of your mid-tier levels will sit there and say, well, this is how you do it. It's the only one true right way. But as soon as you get into that, you are going to get left behind because the entirety of the SCA combat is moving at a pace of forward. So such as now you're talking about footwork that you guys have really been focusing on up there, and you didn't have that before. Well, if I stay stuck in my ways and I just think there's only one true way to teach, then I'm going to get left behind and my stuff's going to be old, and about 5, 6, maybe 10 years from now, it's not going to be that great, and I'm not going to really kill anybody with it, and nobody will want to really learn it. So you have to be constantly changing what you're doing and growing and learning and adding to it. And you can only do that when you're not in a vacuum. So if you as a trainer are only going to one practice and you're only training a certain type of people or something like that, you're not going to really grow or change any of that. And that's one of the big things why a lot of us want to travel. We want to, get on YouTube and look at what are other people doing. We want to, maybe just shut our pie holes for a minute and listen to what other people are saying, even if maybe they aren't as good as us or they're talking about something that we disagree with. So that's kind of how I look at it.
I think that's great. You know what we're going to do is I'm going to throw the next question or next topic really. And the next topic is get to know your students better. And this is an interesting one. And I'm going to actually kind of throw this one at, I'm going to throw it at Tristan again, just because this is one that I haven't seen a lot. And I know Tristan actually does this, but I haven't seen it a lot in the SCA, unfortunately, sometimes. And even in older martial arts, to tell you the truth, when I was in martial arts, we didn't do this one a lot. And that is get to know your students better. And, essentially talks about asking questions. Tristan, do you guys do that at yours?
Absolutely. When somebody comes in for the first time and says, hey, I'm interested, I'll just ask them right out, well, what is it that brought you in? What lights your fire? What interested you in this martial art in Aikido? What aspect of it are you intrigued with? Because I want to get you to that. I want to help you find what it is you're looking for. I had a friend of mine I know that's in I think like a VP position of sales, and she had this great question. She said, okay, all right, in 10 minutes, you're going to teach a class to 100 people. What are you going to teach? And it's the test, right? This was a hiring question for testing somebody that the company was thinking about hiring. And most people would sit and think, well, I could teach what I know, and I could go over this thing that I'm really expert in, and I could. The winning answer is find out what the people want to learn. Find out what they're interested in. If they're not engaged, if you're teaching cooking to a bunch of people that want to show up and learn about auto repair, you're going to lose everybody. You're not going to have anybody interested in what you have to say. As much as you may know about it, really what you need to do is connect with them, find out what their interest is in. And within the SCA, to me, that's finding out of the many things that could bring somebody into SCA fighting, what is it that lights them up? Do they like, dressing up in armor and hitting people? Do they like the martial art aspect? Do they like the competition aspect? Do they like the historical flavor part? Like, there's so many different aspects to this one activity that we often think of as being one-dimensional, but it's not. It's many-dimensional. And if you don't help the student find what they're looking for, they will get bored and quit very, very quickly. So that would be my answer to the question.
So I'm going to throw, and I agree, and I think in the older days, you went and paid your $50, and you went in there, you learned some stuff, and you got out. They didn't care, right? And then even in the SCA, when we first started, it's like, get your gear on. We're going to pound it out in the field. You're going to learn through bruises and any other way. And I don't care. This is just the way we do stuff. And I think unfortunately, there's still a lot of practices like that. This is the way our practice runs. Do it or leave. So I think it's one of those pieces that's important to think about. Barry, do you want to go ahead? I'm going to throw this at you because I know you ask a lot of questions.
All right. Well, I will be completely honest right now. I've got ADD and I was just multitasking. What are you throwing at me?
See, there's a question already. So this is about learning your students, right? Involving them, asking questions, get to know your students better.
Yeah, that can be a hard thing. I actually, I got an example of someone right now. There's definitely students. Obviously, they're not official students. I mean, the practice I have right now, we have a lot of really good unbelts that everywhere I go, anytime someone says I'm doing better, I was like, I'm learning from these guys, because we usually have like conversations, almost on like a peer-to-peer level about, peer in the dictionary definition of it, not the SCA definition of it, but when we discuss what's going on. But there's one in our practice, for example, that has a very almost sort of like hippie kind of like way he's approaching things. And I remember going to another practice, and a very, very high level fighter said, "Oh, he's doing this wrong. He's doing this wrong." And I said, "Yeah, but you know what? He's getting better, and this is kind of how he learns, and he's still improving. So we're just kind of gonna let him go. I don't want to stop him and say, no, stop doing this and start doing it that way, because I'm afraid that he's not going to enjoy it. He's going to move away, and he may just not respond well to that. And sometimes it's a matter of when are they ready to do that? So that's an example of one student. And then we've got another one that I'm thinking of that has sort of been stuck in the same pattern. In fact, if he watches this episode, he probably knows I'm talking about him. He's been stuck in the same pattern for a really long time. And a lot of us are trying to sort of figure out how to break that pattern. So yeah, I mean, there's an example of, two different students versus we have other students that just, they say, hey, tell me what to do. And you tell them what to do and they go and they do it.
Yeah, and I think actually you're 100% right. Some people actually just want to be told what to do. Yeah. They don't want to have to think sometimes. And I think that's important that you find those people too.
Yeah, and you know what? I think those might be the easier students, but sometimes the other way is might be better in the long run. That's how the sport evolves. I mean, I was certain the other kind of student, and I tell everyone this. They say, hey, well, you didn't do it that way. I said, well, if you want to take 29 years to get knighted, you can do it my way.
That's a great comeback.
I mean, there's a lot of truth to that, but at the same time, I do think I have, in at least my own little niche of the world, my own little bubble, I do think I've carved out a little bit of innovation in the sport. And I think that's the advantage of sort of like the more free thinkers, rebellious kind of people that want to do it their own way. And if they eventually get it to work out. We got one of my friends. If you ever get to see a video of him, a lot of times in Two Chuck's tourney, his name, I'll throw his name out there, Adam Greatsword. We went to high school together. And Adam, if you told him to do X, you can guarantee he was not going to do that. And I got to tell you, 30 years later, he has completely invented his own style of greatsword fighting. And it's a very, very high level of fighting. And, at some point, someone may see that and may start borrowing his ideas and doing stuff like that. So, there's room for all different types of people. But I think as teachers, you have to understand that you can't just say, hey, this is, my system and it's my way or the highway. Although some people do that, and the very charismatic ones, or there's, I think, a leadership quality. Like I said, I really envy those people. It's still stuff I'm trying to figure out too,
Yeah, so I would agree. And Nessa, you had a comment.
Yeah. So there's a lot of talk about how people learn and things like that. There's also people with physical limitations as well. I have somebody at my practice who came to me because they wanted to learn the ladder drills I've been doing because they're an amputee. They have a prosthetic leg, and they had one that wasn't for movement. It was just for them to get along. So they had to adapt to moving to the ladder drill without that springing step that we do with it. And I had to adjust how I taught them to do that. Now they have that leg with the springing step, and we're changing things. They're catching on quicker. They're doing the things much better. So now we're doing more. But I had to adapt everything for that physical limitation.
By the way, I love that. And I love that you're giving somebody confidence in something that probably took their confidence away from them. And
we have a goal to be on the Pensick Melee field.
Yep. I think that's one of the biggest joys of being a teacher and a coach. Tristan, you had something.
Yeah. It's funny. Sir Barry was mentioning the student that when you say do X, the last thing he'll do is X. He'll do Z, Q, R, D, everything else but. And I just this last week heard a story about it. This is one of Muhammad Ali's trainers, because Ali was very similar in character, very defiant, resistant kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And when his trainer realized he had an opponent coming up, he would get close enough to Ali that he could overhear this, and he would talk to another trainer and said, I've been studying this opponent that Muhammad Ali's Muhammad's got coming up, and there's something I think would work against him, but I don't know if Ali could pull it off. I'm not sure if he can do it. And so Ali would go against the bag and he'd start working exactly what the trainer talked about. But they never got into that head-to-head confrontation of, here's what you need to do. You got to stop doing this. You got to start doing that, because he knew that was going nowhere. And so I thought it fit in really well to that student that got to do it his own way.
Yeah, no, I think that's really cool. I got a question, because I think, initially we brought the show as how did you go from student to trainer? I'm going to throw this out to a few people. I'm going to throw it out to Sivirid first. And so Sivirid, obviously you talked about it at the very beginning. but was it hard going from, like, where did that transition occur? Did it just occur, or did you start doing it, or do you feel like this is the time I could do it?
I think for switching over to that transition is a long transition, and it's so I started off teaching, okay, very simple things, but a lot of times I didn't have the language or the method to express exactly how to really teach that. And so one thing I found accelerating that is the more I teach and the more I engage with watching other people teach, then all of a sudden I have the language. We talked about, several people have said this. Okay, I have the common language I can speak with. I can talk with this. I can demonstrate this better. And then the other thing is so in some cases it was okay. I learned how the old, serve the soup, throw the shot. And so, but learning beyond just what I had, and again, it's coming back to that. You have to keep learning and practicing the craft. It's a lot of what I'm now teaching is stuff that I've learned in the last 2 years, adapting that to what I did before. And so it's changed the language of how I teach. But it wasn't necessarily easy because I don't feel, especially I come up to Detroit. And so here I have you and Rongwalder and Louis and Fox, and like, okay, well, who am I going to teach? And where's my role in here to teach, even when there's new people there? And so that getting out of my own head and saying, okay, I can actually do this and I can teach this, or I understand this well. And so sometimes, either whether it's just helping people through the ladder drill because they're just having trouble with it, or doing stuff because you're off working with something else, or it's stepping in and fitting those spots, made it easier. And the other place was that coming back, it's still hard for me to say, hey, even at our own practice, to say, hey, let's just do this now. We're going to do ladder drills now. And if no one else does it, oh, well, I mean, I've had lots of people watch me do ladder drills. And so, but again, there's just that confidence, that self-confidence to teach didn't come easy to me right away. And it's taken a while to get there, which is strange because as a professor, I'm used to teaching. So
yeah, exactly.
But I'm also used to having a certain level of knowledge that I say, oh, I should have to have this amount of knowledge before I teach, rather than, no, you teach what you know.
No, I agree. Raphael, when did you make that, really that transition to starting to teach people, and what kind of pushed you that way?
So there wasn't a very clear line. I've been doing a little bit of teaching for as long as I can remember. The biggest thing, so it was my final year in college. It was a smaller practice. We'd really only had one grant level fencer who was there. And then my first 3 years, and then my last year, they kind of faded away. So I was kind of just the most experienced fencer in the room. And I was like, oh, cool. How do I teach 6 people how to do melee who've never done it before? Great. Everyone drop what's in your offhand. We're going to use one sword. Right. I was like, oh, okay. If we simplify this and we just work on placement and hit person with sword and use footwork instead of, well, this person has 2 swords, this person has a shield, whatever, it makes it a lot easier. And then, eventually I got my grant level award, and I went on that workshop, and I've just been doing a lot more coaching work lately. I know one of the comments earlier was hey, if there's a bunch of high-end folks here, how do I deal with that? So that was an internal question I had for myself roughly summer 2019. So I was like, okay, well, if I want to do this rapier thing, my mod is already doing that thing and better. If I want to do this side sword thing, one of the other mods here is doing that thing, and you're just going to go to him. And what I ended up deciding on was I was going to be the longsword guy at practice. So I ended up having a job that summer that took me away for a few months, and figured it out, kind of cross applied some stuff, took a couple classes, and I came back because no one was really teaching inside of this niche at the fencing practice. And ever since, right, whenever people come in the door, we'll be like, okay, cool, pick a sword, and we'll hand them a rapier and a longsword. And we teach more than that here, right? If people want to use any sword made of steel that flexes enough for SAE requirements, we'll teach them. But we have to start somewhere. And I've just kind of gotten into that role of okay, well, if people want to learn rapier, there are 12 people in this room who are highly qualified to teach them. If people want to learn longsword, there's like 2. And I'm the main, like I do more of that. And like the longsword style I teach is like slightly more obscure than some of the other ones, but I have enough of that background from helping with teaching the rapier, teaching all the other stuff for all these years, that I can step into that as well, right? Like I have people who want to, and in the fencing world, where we have like very distinct, like this person is doing like Myers German longsword, and this person is doing, right, like 16th century Italian rapier. Like those things are a little more clearly delineated than I think is happening on the rattan side. And even still, right, I'll get people who want to learn a style of that I don't myself know. And then I have to figure out, okay, cool. So I know what all these concepts are in Italian. I'm going to do some research on like this other style, but then largely, right, we're going to subtitle these things into stuff the other person understands, so that working inside of their system, I'm going to translate these universal concepts of like, okay, if you throw a cut, it has to do these things because physics. And I can describe that physics through this, and I can use very particular Italian terminology. And if you're doing German or if you're doing like English, like whatever your background is, right, like I can fit those ideas inside of your conception of how fighting works. So I spent a lot of time doing these things.
Yeah, and I think the key there is that you dove in. The good part is you found that place to kind of fit in, and then you expand from it. And I think what people really look for out of a trainer is that connection with them. And I think that's really important. And I think that's one thing that all of you are developing is connections with people. And to tell you the truth, when a lot of times when like teachers, when you're first in, you're excited. And then later on, you're just kind of going through, sometimes you going through the curriculum. And what's nice about younger teachers is that one-on-one will keep somebody around. And a lot of times more advanced teachers are jumping from one person to another person and never can create that connection. So Antigone, you have a practice that I would say would be a bit hard to become a trainer at, and you've done it.
Yes. So I'm going to give you 2 quick stories. The first one is, the question is, what was it like, the first time you were moved from student to teacher? So I didn't really move from student to teacher the first time I taught. And it's because I had a really bad experience, which happens. Hopefully I know that other people out there have had this probably very similar experience. That's why I'd like to share it. But the first time I taught, I was basically, but the person that was training me was like, hey, I need you to teach this new person here, just go do it. And I didn't really know what I was doing, and it was the first time. And so I was really nervous. I was anxious. I had so much anxiety about it. I did a terrible job, I'm sure, as the first time I've ever actually had to do this. And so my trainer followed up with the person because they came back to pick them up, so thinking, oh, they'll know at least the basic shot and the basic things. That obviously I did a terrible job, just because I was new at it. And my trainer came to me and was like, well, you didn't teach them anything. You did it. Like, they criticized me very harshly. And because of that, I didn't want to train anyone. And I didn't think I was competent enough or knowledgeable enough for many, many years. And so I really refrained from training or putting my voice out there or classes or anything else. Anytime there's somebody came in, I would give them to somebody else. I was known as the person like, oh, okay, I know who you need. But I didn't actually do any of the training. So I ended up becoming a trainer when my husband had a student who was deaf. And unfortunately, the deaf student could not read his lips because he speaks in hillbilly. And so, yeah. And so I could enunciate, and I also have a little bit of a hearing issue. And so I did understand what the person was going through and what I needed to do. And so I literally attended every private practice with this student. And my husband would tell me what I needed to teach the student, and then I would teach the student. And then my husband would follow up with what he was seeing. And so I did that for almost 3 months. And after that, I had my confidence. I knew so much more than I did before. I wasn't criticized for what I did, like how I taught. I was like corrected. It was very direct correction, but it wasn't you suck or What were you even thinking? It was, you need to do this better. You should have said it this better, maybe, And so it was constructive, but it was very hands-on, and it was one-on-one instead of learning kind of in a group. So I felt comfortable doing it. But that is when I feel like I moved to becoming more of being able to start teaching, which is a very different skill set, I think, and something that you have to master your craft at it. And you're not going to be good at it the first time, which is kind of my whole point. And if you can find somebody that can help you get better at it, that is great. That is absolutely wonderful. But that's kind of my experience of how I've moved over. But yeah.
No, I think I guess I'm sure Tristan agrees. This is kind of why we wanted to have this episode. Is I think there's a lot of probably good teachers out there, or people that want to learn to teach, or to have something to share that maybe they don't have that confidence yet. Maybe they haven't been given that opportunity. Maybe they haven't found a spot like Raphael. You found a spot to fill and be able to share, and do the things. And then once you're there, it's really the important part is digging in and learning to become a better coach and make people appreciate that what you're teaching is important. And, we have a lot of other subjects in the list I think are really super important to cover, but unfortunately we're running out of time. I'm going to throw a couple of questions out here, and then I'm going to throw one more piece at Tristan here at the end. But first question for all of you is, would you mind maybe coming back for a second, kind of the part 2? Because I think it was a great discussion, and we would love to have everyone back. So if you're interested, I'd happy to do that. Give me a thumbs up if you maybe can come back one more time for us. Awesome. And then we'll fit you. I'll work with everybody and get another episode so we can continue on to the list that we had. We have a question from a person in the audience that I actually we are on Great Fighters of YouTube on Tuesday nights with him, and he shows a lot of his own video. This is the first time I think out here and talking. He brings up the point is like, how do you get one of these practices started? How do we go from just sparring to drills, or sparring to teaching to do those things? I guess, the good part is all of you have kind of, in a way, Nessa, I know you've done that. You really opened up. Your practice was all sparring before this, correct? So how did you do that, Nessa?
I just started doing them. So to be honest, when we opened up, we had our first event in our group, and they wanted some classes, and they asked me to do the footwork ladder drill class, and I was like, fine. But I would take the ladder to practice, and I would just start doing them at practice. And like, if you wanted to do them with me, that's fine. If you didn't, that's fine. I wasn't going to push anybody to do them. So, but I just kept doing them. I kept doing other things. And I think my short-term success really helped people going, if she's doing these things and she's seeing success, I probably should be doing these things as well. So, and I still do them.
So, let's jump over to, because Raphael, you sound like you guys have a pretty a practice that's pretty educational, and I found this in most of the rapier community personally. But.
Yeah, so we have a bit of everything. I've definitely had better and worse attempts at getting people to do drills. So idea I've tried that I have not had personal success with, although everyone is free to try it, go, hey, here's a practice that does only sparring. I'm going to show up and teach a class for everyone on this day. Come to this side of the field at this time to take this class. No one showed up. Just like 0 people. So there's a few things I found that work. So first, make drills engaging. There's this idea that drills are boring and like they're your vegetables and you have to eat them. They're good for you, but like, I'm here to have fun. And like fun and drills are seen as exclusive ideas, and they're not. Right? All a drill is, it's a limited scenario to work on less than 100% of all the things. Right? Anything inside of that space is a drill. So it can be, hey, we're fighting, but I'm only going to throw these shots, right? It can also be do a lunge 100 times. And I feel like we have this idea that drills are you're in a lunge by yourself against a wall until someone comes back and gets you. And those suck. So like make them fun. It's like one of the nice ones I'll use for like new folks. We call it the glove game. So you both have a glove. So the first person will get an advance and a lunge. And on the lunge, they try and hit the person with the glove. The other person gets to retreat twice. So once the first person is finished with the lunge, they switch roles, right? So this is, right, it's a limited scenario. You only get these moves on this board with these tools. But you just slap each other with gloves, and that's a lot of fun, especially if you aren't used to hitting people, right? You're like, oh, this is what it feels like. And you're laughing, right? And you're having fun, and it's a good time. It's like finding, I'd say if you are at a practice that currently is 100% sparring and you would like to see a lot of drills happen, start working one-on-one with folks. With the new folks, I often go, hey, what have you worked on so far? And then someone will explain kind of what they've been doing today. And then I'll go, cool. And then I'll do whatever's next. With the more advanced folks, or even intermediate people, I'll go, what do you want to work on today? Right. It takes a while to be able to answer that question. Right. When you show up and someone goes, hey, what do you want to work on today? You're like, I don't know, fighting. But when you've been around for a while, and even still, right, it takes a bit to start thinking about that. Be like, oh, okay, I want to work on distance measurement. I keep getting hit by this shot, right? And the advantage that a drill holds is if you're fighting and you're trying to work on one technique, you're only going to get so many reps of that technique in at that 2-hour practice. If you spend 30 minutes doing a drill on that thing, you are going to get 100 reps. You're going to get like however many, math. Right. You're going to get so many more reps of the thing you're trying to get better at, or the thing that's a hole in your game. And then that person who knocked you out of the finals last week, you are going to smoke them next time. So start one-on-one, make drills engaging, help people solve their problems. Those are my answers.
Yep. Antigone, you have any comment on this one?
So I'm probably going to say something that is somewhat controversial, but we truly believe that your practice, your baronial practice, your shire practice, whatever that main practice is where you have new people, it's very open. We want to make that fun. We want to make that engaging the entire time. We want people to have a good time. We want them to be focused on, I want to come back. I want to continue to do this. And so if drilling isn't fun, which it pretty much never is, there's a very small subset where it is, we don't do it. So how do you become better then? Well, we have a second practice that is just drilling. And so if you move out of the, hey, this is just fun hobby thing for me to come follow and do, I really want to like actually get better at this, then you go to the drill practice and you do drills for 2 hours. And then you get your fun practice and your drill practice. Now, that's not to say at the fun practice, we don't teach drills. So once a month, we teach drills, either via Pell, ladder, whatever you may be. We have a class and we'll teach a drill or something that a person can do, hopefully on their own or with a partner. And so we do teach drills there, but we're not going to spend the whole time doing it or focusing on it in any way, shape, or form. And if you want to do that, we have a whole nother practice for it where it is much more focused, much more serious. And that allows us to have serious fighters who really want to fight, show up to practice, have fun, but then have a place where they can be serious and feel like they're progressing. So it's a little bit controversial because some people are like, oh, you should have a mixture of everything all in one, but we really don't like that or do that. And it's worked really well for us. So there you have it.
Yeah, and I don't think it's controversial. We actually, there's a number of people have already talked. We had an episode that talked about specifically about how to get drills or get training, more training done at practice. And Nate, remind me, and I'll send you that episode. I think we had another show that it literally had a number of people come on and say that they started another practice just to be more educational, more drills. And, you know, and it starts with maybe 2 people, and then it builds to 3. You just let them know it's happening, and the ones really interested do come out. And then I tell you what usually happens is that they get better because they're going to a second fight practice a week and thinking about fighting and doing fighting, and they get better, and everyone's like, oh my God, those drills must be working. Well, I'm sure they are working, but they're also getting more practices in. So that's taking it up to the next level. But if it works, it works. And I think that's important. Tristan, you know, we're running against our time as normal, and we're going to kind of continue on this one. But you brought up a subject. Let's see if I can find that one again. I apologize.
While you're looking for that one, I'll throw just a quick comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I've run into the exact same thing that you guys have been talking about, which is sometimes you need to sell your group on drilling or doing something other than just sparring. And it can be a tough sell. It can be, hey, I just want to show up and I want to, you know, let my aggression out. I want to whack some people with some sticks. I don't want to be bothered with this drilling and stuff. And kind of just like Ali's trainer, maybe they need to overhear, well, how many sport athletes, fighters, even just athletes in general, do their sport like professionals without doing any practice, any drilling? There's no fundamentals work. They just go out and they scrimmage or they play their game. Like whether they're boxers, kickboxers, basketball players, football players, tennis players, who doesn't do any drilling practice or form work or working or building their skills? Like the reason they do that, that's the most direct route to building skill. If you don't want to take the direct route, and I love Barry's comment, oh, if you want to take 35 years, go right ahead. Like that's a great way to go.
29.
Package it that same way. What's that?
I said it was 29 years. Come on, how bad do you think I am?
Yeah, but if you get them to think, oh, maybe I am doing this the hard way. Maybe I am taking the long route. Maybe there is a more direct route to building my skills that I can be better in 6 months than I would be if I just showed up and sparred. You know, so I just wanted to throw that in there as an idea.
Oh, no, and I would agree 100%. I mean, you know, we're going to always have people that want to just come and have fun. And I think, Antigone, that's the key at your local practice is to have that available. At our practice, we have people that just go spar. We're all good with it. And I'll run ladder on the side. And I think that's, you know, Nessa's practice is the same way. And there's room for all of that. And I think, you know, that's going to be the key. Nate, what I would suggest to you is ask somebody for a class. There is no better way. Just ask. And they, I bet you they want to teach one. So, Tristan, I'm just going to bring yours up because, you know, I threw kind of 9 things out from this list, but it was be ready to change patterns with practice and events. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, and what I meant by that was, you know, when you're a young, of course, ambitious fighter, and you think, okay, I want to go to my event or I'm going to go to my practice, and I'm going to get my gear on, and I want to fight. There's a number of people there that are better than me, and I want to get some sparring time with them. I want to do my best. You get into that pattern, right? And that's fine. That's what you're doing to improve your own skill. But that's what you work yourself up for. That's what you prepare for to get to a practice or an event, or, you know, to perform at that tournament. And maybe the tournament's got somebody that's outside your local area that you really want to spar with. And so, all right, we'll go fight the tournament. If I don't meet him in the tournament, I want to go to the pickup field and I want to get some time with him. Your traffic pattern is all in building your own personal skill. As you get into a trainer, that needs to shift. You even, as you prepare to go to a practice, think of, all right, I want to pick out at least 2 or 3 people and help them with doing something. I want to help them improve. If I have to ask them, what are you working on? How can I help you get a little better? You add that to your pattern of what you do at a practice. And the same thing at a tournament. You don't have to go and be the greatest evangelist for training people ever, but take a little extra time and dedicate yourself to, I don't want to just perform for myself. I want to spend some time working with other people. Think of it like you practicing to become a coach, or you practicing to becoming a better trainer. You might spend just 5 minutes with somebody you've never met before. You might spend a half an hour with somebody that you work with on a regular basis. Anywhere and everywhere in between, whether it's your local practices or events or anything, including going to large events like Penzic, the pickup fields at Gulf Wars, anywhere like that, you can do the same thing. You can go out for your own benefit and you can spend a little time helping other people. I will say that it may seem on first blush that you will get more out of merely working on your own skills. Yes, you will get something out of training people, but what you really get when you dedicate yourself to training others is letting somebody else walk away thinking, wow, somebody else cares about helping me. Like that's what keeps people in the SCA and keeps people fired up about participating in the group. And the same thing with any instructor, regardless of whether they're SCA or martial arts or anything. To me, that's a very profound thing.
So, I think the good part is we have a great feel for how this episode is going, and we'll probably add a number of things. I think everybody here kind of probably has more ideas now of how the show wants to work. So we're going to work up a next good show for everybody. We're going to work up some times. I can't thank everybody here enough. We did, usually I kind of, and Tristan gets on me because I'll kind of burn through some topics a little fast, and we get away from the free speech kind of talking and that real good communication piece. And today was a great example. I really enjoyed listening to you guys because it's going back to those basics is critical, and really starting out, that's where you are, and that excitement about learning is learning to teach even excites you even more about learning to be better yourselves. And so I would tell everybody, and I will try to post the show where we talked about how to get other practices going or other drills going or teaching going. And, like Antigone said, that maybe it takes a second practice. Maybe it takes classes at your regular practice. Maybe Barry talked about maybe you start your practice an hour early and say, hey, this is what we're going to do an hour early. I used to do that. Sometimes I'd just be running ladder drills myself because, I knew that I started it early. People didn't show up. So I just, it's time that you can spend getting better and being focused on getting better. So there's tons of ways to do it. I think that the best part is we have a whole new crew, and this is exactly why we started this channel. We have a whole new crew of trainers and instructors and coaches. And, I just posted in our thing. I think that one of the best feelings is watching post-pandemic, how many people have stepped up and how much better our practices are getting, and how they're becoming more organized, and we understand so much more. I don't know about you, Tristan. It makes me extremely happy that.
I'm delighted. I remember hearing the definition of like what would define the ultimate qualification for being a Pelican as somebody who's changed the face of the SCA, and I feel like this project and where everything has happened has been synchronous with so many things about helping change how the SCA does fighting and changes the fighting culture into one that's more helpful, more constructive, more informative, to get people better connected with how to improve themselves. Like that to me really is, I think, changing the face of, I like the SCA as a martial art is taking another step up the ladder to the next higher rung, which is really super cool.
Yeah. So I would normally ask everybody to essentially give them a chance to talk, but I'm going to give everybody a chance to talk in the next episode, and we're going to work on a date. Next week we're supposed to have the Book of Five Rings, but given we'll take a look if people have time or not, and we'll work things around. If everybody has a little bit of time next week, maybe we'll pull it together again. And push the Book of Five Rings off. Otherwise, we can still just go through that. I can't thank you all enough for coming and doing this. It's and sharing with everybody, because I think there's a lot of people looking as like, how can I do this? And seeing that you guys have all done it, and hearing how you've done it, and hearing the methods that helped you get there and the struggles to get there itself. is a big part of getting past your own, their struggles to figure out how to do it. So, like to thank the audience, and we'll be up on our Great Fighters of YouTube. We'll post this up quickly, and keep coming out to the Great Fighters YouTube. Sorry, the SCA Coaches Corner, and come out to the discussion group. And if you have questions, post them up, and we'll definitely get them answered. And I will once again contact everybody, and we'll continue this. This is great. So hopefully everybody
have a good night.
All right. All right. Night, everyone. Have a great weekend and stay safe, please.